What is up, fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Favale coming at you with another episode of the Hardwood Knocks podcast. Before we get started, very quickly, please remember to subscribe to us wherever you consume us. If you're on YouTube, hit the sub button, like, comment, help the algorithm love us back. Subscribe to us on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Google, wherever you get your podcasts. Cross sub on both YouTube and then also a podcast player. If you've done both those things, please join our Discord. The link to that is in the YouTube and podcast description. We have a great time around there. Follow us on all the socials. The links and handles are in the podcast and YouTube descriptions. And tell people about us. Retweet our promos on Twitter. Just help us get the word out there that this podcast is not insufferable at all. Is the least amount of insufferable it needs to be for a general NBA podcast. And I appreciate the community continuing to build or grow. And I heart every single one of you. So we had trade murmurings basically focused on the Hawks and the Jazz, or John Collins centric. Mark Stein had said John Collins was nearly dealt to the Kings over the offseason. And then sources also told Stein that momentum is building on all sides for Collins to be traded during this season, and that his name will be at the fore of the February trade deadline rumor mill. That is not really shocking at this point. He has been marginalized in Atlanta's offense. When you look at last year specifically, John Collins had 33.3 front court touches per 36 minutes and a 20.5 usage rate. This season, he's down to 22.6 front court touches per 36 minutes, and his usage rate is around 16. You add another ball dominant guy, DeJounte Murray, to an offense that already had Trae Young, and then you also sort of moved Collins away from being your primary screener with the addition of Clint Capella in the first place a few seasons ago. His counting stats, his advanced stats, like anything that's prided on volume, is going to be diminished. I think it's probably he would be better off in a different situation. I don't know if you're Atlanta, though. What are you looking to get for him? Stein mentions that they could be in the Jae Crowder running, and we'll mention the Phoenix in a second. But you're Atlanta. You're trying to win now. Are you trading? You're not trading John Collins for picks and prospects. Stein noted that the Jazz have interest in John Collins. That would be super interesting. They're already just trying to play 5 out. I don't know what that package looks like. They have extra first round picks for days. They have salary that they could send in and out. But if you're Atlanta, who are you really looking for here? Is this like you want Malik Beasley and picks, or like is Kelly Olynyk involved in that? I'm assuming maybe people think that they would want Lauri Markkanen. I'm assuming the Jazz want to keep Lauri Markkanen. The Jazz are still in first in the West. And if they're going to go, imagine the Jazz getting John Collins and just making the win now move after everyone thought they were at the front of the line for Victor Wembanyama this year. That would just be, the storyline's already incredible because they're first in the West. That would just be astounding to me. And we're talking about their offense has been potent as hell already. More shooting. And I do wonder if, like, can you feed him enough in this offense to where his touches would be appreciably higher? I think you could get around it. I just look at, like, you're not dealing with anyone who is heliocentric on this team between Colin Sexton and Jordan Clarkson and Mike Conley and Lauri Markkanen. Like, there's no one who has to cannibalize all these offensive possessions. I don't know that I want to see them throw it to John Collins in the post and let him work there, but you could certainly carve out more possessions with him as a screener. Now, would I advocate for the Jazz to do it? It just depends on cost, because I view Collins, and this is a running joke here, as infinitely scalable and can fit anywhere on offense. And even like on Atlanta, he could fit with what he's doing now. It's just not going to be this glitzy role. There's not room for it. It feels like he's buried too much of the time. It's just like you're at the point in the Jazz rebuild where it does still feel a little bit too early. But if the cost has dropped so much because they just want to get rid of the 3 years and $78.5 million left on his deal or something, because they know they have the Hunter extension kicking in. They're paying Clint Capella. They're thinking about DeJounte Murray's next deal. They're paying Trae Young. That's interesting. Maybe they consider like Onyeka Okongwu as someone who could play with Clint Capella eventually, or he's their big guy of the future, and they're not that married to Capella. I honestly don't know. Collins was supposed to be dealt over the summer. To the Kings would have been weird. Like the way they're playing now, I guess what would they have, the top offense in the league, but I'm assuming Barnes would have been involved, and I do think their defense would suffer quite a bit if you go from Barnes and Murray and Sabonis to Collins, Sabonis, and Murray. But the Kings clearly had a vision, and that was just to assemble a crap ton of shooting, and look, it's working. They have the second best offense in the league right now. So that would have been fascinating. I would bet against them becoming involved again, even though Harrison Barnes has probably been a little bit better, or has been a little bit better recently, underachieved overall in the season. I would think that the Kings aren't trying to really rock the boat here, though. And they already went ahead and made the deal for Kevin Huerter. And I don't know if it was supposed to be part of a larger context deal, like what both of those guys have wound up in Sacramento. I'm very curious to see what the deal would have looked like there, but I'm assuming it would have been like Harrison Barnes and Collins sort of as the meat and potatoes of that deal. Shams did mention that the Suns might be in on John Collins, but that they didn't want the 3 years and $78.5 million left on his deal. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. If they don't want that, then they don't want John Collins. I don't think that deal is egregious. Again, his role has changed a lot. It's diminished in Atlanta a lot. That is not obscene money by any measure for someone as talented offensively as John Collins. Do I think that he would be a great fit for Phoenix? I'd rather see them consolidate into someone who's just more of a ball handler, whether they're on the wings or the guard position at this point. John Gambadoro came out pretty forcefully and did say that the Suns would not be interested in John Collins. So I would bet against that, like having been a thing, or if it was, it's probably the fact that it got out at all means that it's dead in the first place. But this sort of moves on to the other name that's sort of banding about the trade rumor as much. Jae Crowder. Stein wrote there was a good bit of buzz that Phoenix was finally making progress on a Crowder deal, one that would likely land him with one of his most ardent suitors, which was Milwaukee. Yet no trade materialized, and by week's end, chatter had begun to resurface that Atlanta remains a potential Crowder destination and should not be discounted. I guess it's like sort of a third-party team there. I'm just curious as to the framework of a Milwaukee deal. If Grayson Allen's involved, like the Suns, there has to be a third and fourth team there. The Suns don't need Grayson Allen. Was Milwaukee trading a distant first-round pick? And I believe they can trade a 2029 first right now. So, like, I wouldn't give that up for Jae Crowder, but if they were willing to, is that enough? That plus Allen to get Jae Crowder. Would you do that for your Phoenix just to, arm yourself with the additional asset, which gets into a really interesting discussion about the Suns and how urgently should they be looking to move Jae Crowder? Because on the one hand, you're looking at CP3 out, right heel injury still, and there's something on that in a moment that I found interesting too. I threw in here. Cam Johnson out, recovering from that meniscus injury. DeAndre Ayton's looked kind of better over the past few games. Mikal Bridges on fire, getting good minutes from Cameron Payne. But like, how much do you lean on the depth that you have now? It still feels like you could use, for when you're at full strength, someone who is by far and away your sixth best player. And if you think that's Cameron Payne, all right, like then roll forward and maybe see if you can let this march closer to the trade deadline and see what materializes. The name I've kept coming back to, and it's not an original name, but like Eric Gordon seems to make so much sense for this team. I also wonder, can you get away with not giving a first round pick for him? If you're asking Houston to take on money beyond this season, you probably can't, but they do have KJ Martin floating around in there in Houston, and they have like a superfluous number of sort of like forward types at this point. Jayshawn Tate will eventually come back. Usman Garuba has been getting minutes. They have Jabari Smith Jr., who's playing, alongside a big almost all the time. They have Tari Eason, who, he's 6'8", he can play the 3, but he can also play the 4. Would you be willing to move on for Martin, Gordon, and you get a first, and then I would say Crowder and Shamet from Phoenix? Or I guess you could look at it as maybe if you do want all expiring money here, Dario Saric is in the last year of his deal. So you go Saric, Crowder for Gordon and Martin. Are you giving up? I guess you could do those two salaries straight up for Gordon, Saric and Crowder for Gordon. And then if you're Houston, are you trying to get like a pick for Crowder elsewhere? And so maybe you get Gordon without costing yourself first round pick, but maybe if you're Phoenix, you can do 2023 and Saric and Crowder for Gordon and Martin. And I don't hate that deal for them. I think KJ Martin would bring a nice element of rim pressure to that team. 3-point shooting can be iffy if he's not like ultra wide open and firing off the catch. But I think that's someone that they could make work on that roster and is a very versatile defender. And I think he gives you more offense than a Josh Okogie and sometimes even more than a Torrey Craig. Sometimes. So you don't necessarily have to cater towards one side of the ball as much with him. But what I like about Eric Gordon is, to me, yes, you have CP3, you have Devin Booker. You can play Gordon at the 3 in those situations. Would you be reluctant to do so in the playoffs? Maybe. You're going to be much more likely to play him, though, than Payne with Booker and Paul. And so if Mikal Bridges can keep this up, especially his quick decision-making, maybe you feel more confident in him being that third ball handler in certain lineups. Or maybe you think it's Cam Johnson, because, hey, if it's Mikal Bridges and Ayton with Gordon and CP3 and Booker, it's because you sat Cam Johnson. Is Gordon going to be better than Cam Johnson in certain matchups? I honestly don't know. That's also kind of why, though, it might make more sense to acquire a guard, because if you know that you're locked in to like all of those 5 guys in your closing lineup, sort of the next thing that you would need off the bench is just that third ball handler. It's easier to get that in the guard most of the time. And this brings me to my point about CP3. Monty Williams had this quote over the weekend, came from Gerald Bourguet, and it was Monty Williams said this: Chris Paul's not ready to play the way he feels he needs to be. We feel he's still not there yet. Chris wants to be out there. You may see him shooting, but there's a ton more to it than just getting up shots. There are other things and other check marks that we have to get past. When I see him shooting, I get excited, but we still have to get him to a certain place. That, was via AZ Central. This one was via Gerald Bourguet. Monty Williams on Chris Paul's nagging sore right heel. I can't really speak to that. It's probably taking a bit longer than people thought it would because we haven't shared like what it is, and it's just how we operate. I find that hysterical that he's just sort of admitting, "Oh, we don't fucking tell you guys about injuries." It's like the Knicks should sort of come out and do that. Something just like, we're not going to be transparent at all, so fuck that. But like, if this is more serious than we were led to believe, or the Suns even thought, you need like that. I would think that extra guard juice, and the fact that Eric Gordon is someone who could come in and then play alongside CP3, or Booker, or both at the same time. Like, I think he can hold up defensively. He's stout enough, like just kind of like strong enough to hold up as a 3 in certain lineups. I think it's an ideal acquisition, and I also think it's ideal not because his money comes off the books unless you win a title this year, but the opportunity cost of getting him shouldn't be more than this year's first round pick. And if you're the Suns, you have to plan around the next star becoming available, being on Kevin Durant's wish list, if and when he decides he wants another trade from Brooklyn. And so if it only costs you the 2023 first, you can still build workable trade packages where you're not going to be encumbered. I'm talking this season too, like getting a first in 2025. That could be sort of almost standard fare now when you're looking at like that. If you're expecting that's the first round pick is the Nets or another team to glean in a superstar trade, that's not egregious. And so if you're not giving up more than your 2023 first round pick, or even your 2023 first round pick, or maybe you're able to structure it so you're not going to need this, but it's protected for X this year, and then it turns into 2 seconds. Like, there's no rollover, so you're unencumbering yourself even more in future trades. That would seem to make a lot of sense. There are other names that could be out there. Maybe they're on a smaller scale. Maybe Phoenix believes that they can sort of navigate this regular season stretch because they're a machine and reevaluate at the trade deadline. I'm not against that either. I think a move needs to be made at some point, though, and I've really liked Eric Gordon for this team for a while. I don't know that I would give up a first-round pick alone on its face for a half season of Eric Gordon, but if you throw KJ Martin in there, I do think things would start to get a little more interesting there. And I've been through other Phoenix Suns trade targets, so you can go check out. That was a segment on both the podcast and YouTube, so you can look for it. I will say just a name that I would watch if he's healthy, which I don't know how healthy he was going to be. I thought Cody Martin would be a really good fit in Charlotte, and he's out right now, so he's not a really good fit. But that would just be, again, another name where it's not bankrupting you of your assets. You're still keeping yourself flexible and asset rich for future deals. But the Jae Crowder stuff beyond, I really want to know what the framework of that Milwaukee trade reportedly was. Atlanta for Crowder, I want to know what they're giving up. Like, are they trading another pick? There are only a select few picks that they can trade after giving up DeJounte Murray. Are they giving up Jalen Johnson in that deal? And is that a team that, like, is he someone who intrigues Phoenix there? And there needs to be other money involved on top of that too. So I'm still very curious to see where Jae Crowder ends up. And I guess the Suns have played well enough to where there doesn't need to be urgency. I guess I'm a little bit surprised that there's not more urgency, though. But also, this could just be a matter, not to use the but word like 80 times, of just letting the trade market develop closer to December 15th. We're almost there, folks. It's like less than 4 weeks away. So that might be what teams or what the Suns are sort of thinking. And don't know. And also, Jae Crowder's value is, I guess it's not getting any lower. It's also not getting any higher. Like, it's kind of just bottomed out because he's not with the team. And so I'm still very intrigued to see where he ends up. And I would be very curious to know the framework of that reported Milwaukee deal. The Knicks, surprise, surprise, were involved in some trade rumors. They apparently are, this is per Michael Scotto of Hoops Hype. They're reluctant to part with a first-round pick to move off Evan Fournier's contract. He's one guaranteed season after this one, and then the 4th year of his contract's a team option. He's basically fallen out of the Knicks rotation, and so you're not boosting his trade value by doing that, and he's owed almost $19 million next year. Also, this is per Scotto, it's believed that Immanuel Quickley and Derrick Rose are available, as well as Miles McBride, because of how crowded the backcourt is in New York. That is, I guess, somewhat interesting. I would, if you're Moving Derrick Rose is fine. He even said he doesn't know what his place on this team is. Maybe there are teams that could actually use him too if they think they're going to be able to get 15 to 20 minutes reliably out of him per game for the rest of the season. And his contract, he only had 2 guaranteed years, so this is, he's functionally an expiring contract. Quickley's interesting. Offense has been all over the place. Defensive effort has been really good this year. Your backcourt rotation is not so stuffed that it's like, hey, let's get rid of Quickley and Rose and McBride. And so I'm thinking it's move one of these guys, and Rose would make the most sense there. I wonder if the Knicks would use Quickley if it meant getting off of Fournier's contract. That feels a little bit just like selling too low on Immanuel Quickley there. But I could see a point, given how well Jalen Brunson has played, and also I don't know if this is trying to gear more of the teams toward Julius Randle, but it also could help to give RJ Barrett some more run as the primary ball handler with more shooters around him. RJ Barrett plus bench lineups, RJ Barrett plus lineups independent of Julius Randle is basically what I'm getting at. So maybe that would be the logic behind trading Derrick Rose and Immanuel Quickley and like Miles McBride. We know the Knicks have designs on bigger fish than just like sort of this trade where they're clearing out a rotation spot, unless their season just sort of completely takes a nosedive and they decide like, oh, we're going to rebuild. Quickley's name is just, it feels like being undervalued by New York, or that Quickley is the one that might want out of New York because he's going to be extension eligible, just like Obi after the season. And his role has been probably more steadier than ever this year, but not understanding where you stand relative to the rest of the organization. That has to get frustrating. There have been nights where, what was the game? It was like a week or two ago at this point, where like Tibbs decides like, no, like Derrick Rose is our guy to come off the bench first. So it's just the Knicks are really tough to read with what they would be doing on the trade market. I just don't. To me, maybe Quickley's reputation has been inflated a little bit by playing in New York, but I do think he's more than just this afterthought. He's been a better defender, I think, than a lot of people realize. And if you give him like more space to operate, I think that he ends up being not a floor general, but that we see his offensive value ascend and then also sort of level off or be more steady, more reliable than it has been in New York. That's going to do it for this one. Like I said, we're going to have our one question for every Eastern Conference team coming out this week, and there will probably be another episode or two baked in as well. Please remember, if you've made it this far, hit that sub button on YouTube. Subscribe on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Join the Discord. Follow us on the social media channels. Links are on the screen, or handles are on the screen, or in the podcast and YouTube description. Until next time, and as always, I leave you to shout out to the one, the only, the legendary Frank Ntilikina.